But you were saying that enlightenment is part of the problem. What do you mean by that?
Well, I mean that the 18th century Aufklärung is part of the problem. It's like what Adorno, I think it was, who said about the cruel instrumentality of reason.
But isn't Adorno also part of the problem?
Well, at least he knew it, though, apparently, if he coined a phrase like that, because that says it to me. It's the cruel instrumentality of reason. Rationalism, rationality, rationalism. Rationality is fine. Rationality is good. Rationality is so rare you might as well call it psychedelic. I mean, human beings are almost never rational, but rationalistic all the time, especially since the 18th century. Rationalism, yes, we've got way too much rationalism, not enough rationality. And you look at who are the most rational people, for example, on the question of drugs, are the drug users. They're the ones who talk, who see the complete irrationality of the war on drugs, for example. That this is economically, politically, psychologically, spiritually, in every way irrational. So it's the drug users who are rational, but they're supposed to be, or I should say, we are supposed to be the irrational ones, or the surrational, or the surrealist ones, or something. No one ever gives us credit for being rational. That's because the Aufklärung caused this split between rationality and rationalism. Yeah, and it's possible to be completely spiritual and romantic and still be rational. Be a rational human being, not frothing at the mouth, crazy. Yeah. So that's what I mean by the problem of enlightenment.
But the Islamic societies, they stopped the way which just leads to enlightenment or the Aufklärung in the 18th century. Why do you think...
Well, they stopped even sooner than that, if you want to be specific about it. They had, as you pointed out before, there's no Islamic Renaissance. So we can't obviously talk about... If there's an Aufklärung, it's only in the 19th century, and it's in purely imitation of the West. It's people like Afghani and Muhammad Abdu and so forth. But... there was never any Renaissance either in Islam or China. And Joseph Needham, the great historian of Chinese science, already noticed this, that at a certain point both China and Islam were way ahead of the West, technologically and scientifically. And why didn't they make the transition? Why couldn't they make the transition to modern science and Renaissance and Reformation and so forth and so on?
But why did they stop? They had a knowledge about what is coming?
Yeah.
A feeling?
There are two ways you could look at this. One is to say that they stopped because their systems themselves were flawed. They were overdeveloped, hyper-developed rather than developed. That's more or less Needham's position. The other position is that they didn't do that because that would have meant a break with spiritual tradition that they were not prepared to take. That the Renaissance and leading on to the Industrial Revolution is a radical break with human spirituality that was not possible for Islamic civilization or Chinese civilization. This is an interesting position. I wouldn't want to say that, therefore Islam is good and the West is evil, or some stupid result, some stupid reduction of this idea. But nevertheless, there's some interesting aspects to that thought, that a culture which is rooted in some kind of a respect for the world as a divine manifestation cannot make the step to a science which is essentially going to end up with an anti-human or an inhuman position. And the problem, as the Muslim critic would see it, is that in Christianity, in Christian culture, the split between the body and the spirit was too radical. Too radical, almost dualistic. So that in the West, this movement towards the Industrial Revolution could come because the body was completely unimportant and only the spirit was real. Whereas for China, especially, and for Islam, apparently, to a certain extent at least, this was not true. That the body was somehow divine enough that it had its own inalienable sphere, and that both on the conscious and the unconscious level, it would be impossible for an Islamic scientist or a Chinese scientist to make the step towards so denying the body, as, for example, Descartes denied the body. Right, the body
Minsky or the Extropia. Or
they're all
David Gallant.
They are all Cartesians. They're all Cartesians.
Yeah.
Descartes focuses this for us, with the body as dead meat and the mind as the only spark of the divine. Yeah.
But the new machines and the systems, they are not interested for the body and the spirit.
That's right. They're all Cartesian.
Or whatever, they have 1 and 0, and it's a clear decision.
That's right. It's still Descartes.
But then can we not work with these machines? Then the machines are representations of the wrong system.
Possibly.
Of the wrong thing.
Possibly. Just because a technology works doesn't mean that it's true. I have to maintain this in the face of any arguments about logical consistency here. Just because the steam engine worked doesn't mean that it's God. The way Freud thought it was. Apparently Freud thought the steam engine was God because he constructed the entire unconscious on an analogy with the steam engine. Apparently we think the computer is God because all of our analogies about consciousness are now based on the computer. The brain is a computer. Or if it isn't, it soon will be.
A meal machine.
Yeah, that's right, a meat machine. L'homme machine. So nothing very new about these ideas. They go back to La Métrie and Descartes. If you look at Cusanus and Bruno and Pico della Mirandola and Marsilio Ficino and that whole crowd, they were attempting to dignify the body again, contra the church. Okay. It was Cusanus who said that the earth was sacred. Actually, he said that the earth was a star and worthy of dignity and adulation. In other words, it was the gist of Pico's ideas were there in Cusanus. Now, to me, this is not the winning paradigm. These are the losers. Okay, the winners are the whole line of thought that led to Descartes. Those and to Newton.
Leibniz?
And Leibniz is a funny figure, right? Is he a Hermeticist or is he the other one? Leibniz has these Hermetic. In fact, they all had Hermeticist interests. Newton was a tremendous alchemist, but of course, he suppressed that. So it was in this quarrel between Hermeticism, Newtonianism, and Cartesianism. I think basically it was a 3-way quarrel. And Hermeticism could have been modern science the way we would have liked to have seen it, with the sacred earth theory, a theory of sacred earth. Even Newtonianism might have been that, but unfortunately it wasn't. And when it came down to it, Newtonian and Cartesian ideas joined together to defeat the Hermeticists. This is what Romanticism is all about. As soon as Hermeticism is crushed, it pops up again as Romanticism, but now it's not a scientific paradigm anymore. It's crazy. It's poetry. It's pseudoscience. It's Naturphilosophie.